Up first, let's go with our buddy Xeno. Him from South Korea. Xeno, thank you so much for calling in again. And let me start off by just saying, hey, I think I was a little quick to kind of jump on you last time, Xeno. So let's have a good conversation and really just tackle whatever it is you want to talk about today. So how are you? You're with Secular Rarity and Captain Dadpool.
I'm good. How about yourself? And look, what happened last call doesn't matter to me. It's fine. And I totally understand what you're saying. So
I like that thought. Let's push forward.
Okay. So I want to start with the fact that God is, we need to define that first. And so I want to ask you a simple question before I go on. When you think of the word God, what do you think of yourself?
I don't. I tend to take a stance of theological non-cognitivism or agnosticism. So both of these concepts, while slightly different, do basically get down to the main crux, which is nobody seems to have an understandable definition of this entity that we're trying to ascribe attributes to.
Yeah. So would you say that, I agree with that, by the way. Would you say that you come from something, like you're contingent upon something else? For example, you have leaves, and then leaves are on trees, so that the leaves are contingent to the tree. So do you believe that you're contingent upon anything at all?
I honestly, and this may sound a little strange, but I'm not 100% on either camp, and here's why. If where I fall is a more hard determinism, then it seems to be the case that it couldn't be any other way. I couldn't be anywhere than right here at 2 p.m. on this Sunday, right? Because if everything else was already determined, then it and so if everything is determined because of that, then it's like, I don't know that it could be any other way. I'm not 100% positive in general when it comes to like, hey, could this thing be otherwise? Yeah, it kind of feels like to me that this pen could probably be different and it wouldn't change everything about the fabric of reality. But if all of reality that we understand came from a singularity that has continued to expand outward based on, observable and testable, reliably consistent, methods and so forth, like, the dominoes are always going to fall the way that dominoes are going to fall. And we can't really, like, we couldn't do otherwise, So I honestly, not 100%, not 100%.
So I would say the singularity could be maybe like a piece of glass. Let's say, metaphorically speaking, if you drop the light bulb, I think the singularity could just be a shard. So where I'm getting at is, you do believe you come from something. Like, it sounds to me like you're saying you understand reason exists and cause and effect. Causality does exist. And maybe in some world it does not exist. But as far as we know, cause and effect is a thing. And so that means you come from something, not just your mom. Of course, it goes way back further than that. And
real quick, Xeno, real quick though, let me jump in because I think this is kind of an interesting thing. And I don't know that either of us are going to be able to go too deep, but if the whole concept of like space-time, right, being like, fundamental fabric of the universe, fourth dimension type thing, if all of that breaks down like before the singularity, right, which may not be a coherent thought, but if all of that breaks down, doesn't that kind of mess with cause and effect stuff? Like if we are in like a B theory of time, like cause and effect seems to not be as important, right?
So, yeah, that's true. That means cause and effect in some areas, some sets, the cause and effect could just be null. Like, there is no cause and effect, right? And then in set B, let's just say we're in set B, we do have this cause and effect, but that doesn't negate the reason, right? So reason is above cause and effect. Reason on the tier list would be S tier. Cause and effect would be like C tier. So
when you're saying
it happened is basically.
Oh no, go ahead. No, go ahead. I think you were about to explain what I was going to ask. So,
okay. So the reason itself, when I'm describing God, we can switch out the term God for reason, basically. And so if whatever reason it is, like I don't have to describe what it looks like, or if it even is singular. I just know the reason itself is what I'm talking about when I say God. And that's why I stopped being atheist. And I think I was smoking too much weed that day. But I came to that conclusion, and I said, there's no way I could be atheist anymore. Because the reason itself...
Do you think when you're saying that you're replacing, because I think I'm following you with kind of the way that you're using reason in this sense, and it's more than just like, I tripped and fell on the rock. We're adding in that whole like cause and effect might be wonky here. We're adding in that whole like not this infinite chain of things like starting from something like we're kind of just importing all of that here, but it almost sounds to me like you're getting to God by default here, where it's just like, well, I guess we don't have any other options. Gotta be a God. Do you feel like that's what you're doing when you replace God and reason there? Or am I just off base?
That's exactly what I'm saying. So when you say it's got to be God, instead of saying, let me say this last point, instead of saying, well, it's got to be God, basically what you're saying is, well, there's got to be a reason.
Yeah.
And if there's not a reason, what world do you live in where there's not ever a reason?
Sure. So here's kind of my reason as to why my God, I guess, as to why I asked that. That seems to me like a bad way to come to conclusions, because I don't think that we ever have the capability of ruling out all other potential options, right? And if we don't have the ability to truly rule out everything, then what we're doing is that whole fun Sherlock Holmes thing where he's like, well, we ruled everything else out. This guy must be the killer. And it's like, well, if we're standing in a room with 4 people and somebody is on the floor dead and everybody has blood on their hands or something that looks like blood, it's like, if we go around and we test everything and like this guy's ketchup and like this guy's tomato sauce of some other kind, whatever, this guy has blood. It's like, well, but when you say that at the end of the day, you're kind of just defaulting to God here and you're using it synonymously with reason. That just seems to me like not a good justification to come to any conclusion.
Okay, so when you first talk about the metaphor or the example with the guys in a courtroom, the thing is we're not selecting a guy out of the 4 people. It's a group. We're saying the murder happened. That's the reason. So we're not saying, hey, we're going to choose one of you because we think you murdered that person. What we're basically saying is the murder, it took place, right? And so now we have these 4 suspects that we're interrogating. We're not picking one.
Sure, but the issue is still more focused on how we're getting to the fact that the murder existed, right? The reason that we accept that a murder happened is not because by default we just say, well, it couldn't have been a brain aneurysm, right? Like his liver looks fine, so it wasn't liver toxicity. Like I guess he was murdered. That's not how we come to that conclusion, right?
No. He's dead, though. He's dead. So,
but that's different from being murdered, right? There's a different claim there. Right. And so if what we're doing at the end of the day is making the very general claim of saying, well, there has to be a reason for all of this stuff, I kind of don't disagree with that. But it just seems to me like when we say, well, we can just call that reason God, what we're saying is really fundamentally kind of making that God worthless. Like that God doesn't seem to be doing much, right? It definitely isn't anything close to the classical God of like classical theism and stuff, right?
That's right. That's why I'm a deist. I believe the Bible's bullshit. I hate Christianity. I got black sheep from my family because they're all Christians, and I just hate the whole Jesus resurrection thing. But that's why I said I started going a completely different way with God, where it's not any of these like folklore or fairy tale bullshit stories. It's completely something else. And that's kind of the area I'm exploring.
Why call it God though? Is it what's the drive to give it that label? Why not just leave it at the reason? I mean, that kind of sounds like a cooler name anyway. You could
Well,
probably make better merch. I'm just saying.
so the reason is because I, when I'm talking to you guys, I have to articulate myself some way. So instead of
Sure.
calling and saying, "Hey, I believe in Baphomet," or "Hey, I believe in blah blah blah," and that basically means the exact same thing.
Sure. Sure.
So it's just a reason, like you're just giving a reason, a name. But that's basically all I had to say.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I thought we had a pretty decent conversation, and again, I guess where I'm at is it seems to me like we're just trying to shoehorn in a concept that has existed but been really poorly defined for a long time, and you're just using this particular definition. But again, it doesn't seem like once you do that, once you say that this is God, it doesn't seem like the God does much anymore or anything, and
Yeah, he
I
doesn't
go,
do much, and that's he's boring.
yeah,
At that point, he's very boring. You would never hear me say I think God is maybe like this creature that is beyond time. I don't even. I understand what that means and all, but I just don't. As a programmer, I'm a programmer. I know people hate when I say that. I just can't get on board with that type of logic. So I'm kind of calling in more with like a programmer's perspective, like. At least me as a programmer, my perspective is like tier levels and stuff. And there are things above you and there are things below you. And they're all fucking programmed in with properties and components and traits. And we all have different traits and components and properties. And so the thing is, I'm not saying God is this giant programmer. I'm just saying this is the work of a shit ton of modding in life. Like we can mod the universe. And so you have all these concepts and shit because we've created all these different theories. I'm just going back to the very beginning of all the theories and saying, well, whatever the reason is for that code to exist is basically what I'm calling God. So,
and I think
would recommend.
Yeah, go. Hang on. Go ahead, Captain.
I'd recommend you check out a book called "God: The Failed Hypothesis" by Victor Stanger. He goes into the claims of deism. And says, basically whether if God is deistic, theistic, pantheistic, panotheistic, whatever, we would be able to detect traces of that being's intervention within the creation and the goings on in the cosmos. And ultimately it's like, there is nothing. Science can't detect anything that has caused any of this to happen. So yeah, if you really want to like dig into that position and really
I got to check that out.
Dig your feet in it.
Yeah,
I highly recommend that one. Yeah,
and I think that's a good yeah. Thanks. Honestly, it was really great. And please like hang out with us again and call us back. You've always got some interesting thoughts for sure. I think where I'm left with, honestly, Dadpool, is if that's what we're meaning when we say God or a deity of any kind or supernatural anything and so forth, it seems like it's just not there to me. It just seems functionally the same as saying it's not there, right? And if we can't interact with it, if we can't detect it, and at the end of the day, really all it is just the first time that the clock was wound, it's kind of like, that doesn't seem like how do we know that that's not just a natural process?
It's still just a claim that you're making. Like, what is the evidence to back up this claim? Like,
absolutely,
you can say it's one God, you can say it's multiple gods, you can say it's a deistic God, or you can say it all happened through naturalistic means. Which one's more likely? The only thing we have consistent evidence of is naturalistic means.
Yeah.
So that's the safest one to go with. But instead, if you want to be like, oh well, everything's natural up to this point,
except for the one,
God.
Except for this one thing,
that's dumb. No,
yeah,
it doesn't work.